Hello, I'm Per Davidsson. I have been asked to explain in 5 minutes what the external enabler framework is about. Let's see how I go with that. If we take this from start. So in 2015, I published this paper, where I arrived to the conclusion that we need alternatives to the objective opportunity concept. It doesn't work well. So I suggested external enabler instead for the changes in the business environment that can be helpful for business, for entrepreneurship, action and success. In this paper in Academy of Management Discoveries, I argued and demonstrated that the external environment has been sorely neglected in entrepreneurship and strategy scholarship in the last couple of decades. In this review with Ji-Young Kim, we examined previous research on how external changes relate to entrepreneurial action and success, and we found that this literature is small, it is scattered, it typically looks at one change at a time. It's often eclectic or theoretical. There are no common conceptualizations except for institutional theories, which often leads to arguments about legitimation. And especially the quantitative research is usually macro to macro. It is a change leads to an environmental change leads to an increase in the business startup rate, but not any detailed knowledge about the strategic use of the benefits provided by this change. So with Jan Recker and Fred van Briel, we developed this external enabler framework where we acknowledge that agents are important and that the stable context is also important, but we do not focus on that. We acknowledge that there are seemingly very different types of environmental changes, technological, regulatory, demographic, social, cultural, macroeconomic, and so forth. But we don't focus on differences by type. We focus on commonalities across different types of change. So we talk about characteristics of external enablers that all of those kinds of changes can share. So they can vary in scope and they can vary in the type of onset. On the micro level, they can provide a range of different mechanisms that are enabling, that can help improve supply or increase demand or apply appropriability of the value that is created. Those mechanisms enter into different aspects of the venture creation process. It can be the trigger of the process. It can shape the market offering. It can shape the venture, its business model. It can shape the process of venture creation. And it can also be outcome enhancing or a combination of those different roles. We showed in the review with Ji-Young that in past research, they do actually encounter and discuss those different types of characteristics, mechanisms, and roles in very different terminology across those different types of changes. So we want this framework to invite research across different types of environmental change, and that this becomes a research stream where knowledge is transferable across types and more cumulative. We want to encourage research on variance in change. For example, here we have plotted the sectoral and spatial scope of various changes or various types. And this is strategically important because the scope influences who will act, how they will act, and how large the ventures can grow and so forth, how successful they can be. We want to encourage research that doesn't just look at the single change before or after, but interaction among external enablers. So for example, with COVID, we've seen that it is not just the health crisis, but also the countermeasures and the behavioral changes, the social cultural change that leads to new openings for new business in terms of action and success. And we've also seen how COVID is a catalyst for making use of the potential in new digital technologies that was already there, but hadn't been widely adopted. And we want to invite more research that explicitly links macro and micro so that we get more knowledge about the strategic use of the potentials in environmental changes. So that, in a nutshell, is what the external labor framework is about.